Hello everyone and welcome to the fourth in a series of videos that deal with the AQA GCSE English Language Paper 1 Question 5, Creative Imaginative Writing based around the panoramic picture of Southwark Fair. Please make sure you have watched the first 3 lessons in this series, linked below in the video description box. Otherwise the things discussed in this lesson won't make complete sense. Okay, with that in mind, from this point I am going to assume that you have watched at least the first, second and third videos, if not participated in the activities within them, and therefore you should remember that we were working from and writing a description of a busy fair based upon a picture of one drawn in the 18th century called the Southwark Fair. In video and lesson 1, you were introduced to the CCTV and PAR methods of creative writing and tasked with writing your own description of the picture using these techniques. Then, in the second video, you were shown a model answer and shown how to enhance your vocabulary, looking for synonyms for words that appeared in the model, before being shown how you can make simple improvements to the big picture, or TBP, to help achieve a high grade response, changing out bland words for more impressive ones, and starting to use adverbial phrases and a range of punctuation to really lift your work above the average. In the third video, we started to look at how to create the main body paragraphs of our creative writing, specifically focusing on the zoom in, focus and zoom out sections of the CCTV method. You will remember that the creative or descriptive writing task, which is question 5 of paper 1 of the AQA syllabus, assesses you on the following assessment objectives. AO5. Communicate clearly, effectively and imaginatively, selecting and adapting tone, style and register for different forms, purposes and audiences. Organise information and ideas using structural and grammatical features to support coherence and cohesion of text. And AO6, use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose and effect with accurate spelling and punctuation. Now, I'm not going to reread my model response to you as this will take up valuable time. Instead, I will assume you are familiar with it, having watched the second video in this series. Should you need to recap, please feel free to watch the Southwark Fair model answer video, where the answer is read in its entirety and without interruption. So having completed our first and second paragraphs, the big picture or TBP, and our first zoom in, focus and zoom out paragraphs, we are now going to focus on creating another of these paragraphs, but also using the zoom out or concluding sentences of one paragraph to link to the zoom in or topic sentences of the next CCTV paragraph. With that in mind, today's learning question is: can I improve upon my second main paragraph of my creative writing response to the Southwark Fair picture, developing seamless links between paragraphs? Before we continue, I want you to look up the definitions of and find at least one synonym for the following words. You can download the task sheet and type or write onto this, or you could just write these definitions in your notebook. You have 10 minutes to do this. Now that you've completed this task, you should have a group of words, definitions and synonyms that look something like this. Remember that in order to create a decent piece of creative writing, two good methods and techniques you could use include the CCTV and PAR methods. The CCTV method is broken down like this. TBP, the big picture. Set the big picture in your opening paragraph. This is the introduction to what you are going to focus on. Then you zoom in on a particular object or thing in the picture and begin describing it in general terms. Focus on a smaller detail on the thing you have zoomed in on and describe this in more detail. Zoom out, adding a linking sentence where you mention something else that you are going to describe before following the zoom in, focus and zoom out steps again in the next paragraph. Whereas the PAR method is the use of prepositions, words such as under, over, beneath, above, in, used to introduce the thing you are going to discuss in more detail in your sentences and paragraph. ing ending words, words such as becoming, understanding, beckoning, again used to introduce the thing you are going to discuss in more detail in your sentences and paragraph, but in a less pedestrian way. For example, instead of saying the boy wanted to know what was in the open box, using an ing opening word, you could say beckoning the boy the half-open box with the torn flap and strictly confidential stamped on the side enticed him to break the rules, bite into the forbidden fruit and examine the box in more detail. ly ending words, words such as quickly, strongly, rapidly, hungrily and stupidly. And finally, ed ending words. These are words such as finished, started, lasted and blasted. However, even though in the last lesson we learnt how to write individual paragraphs as individual sections, this is not enough. To secure a top grade response, the exam board wants to see that your paragraphs are fluently linked and with seamless integrated discourse markers. Now, the phrase discourse marker is a convoluted way of saying a connected phrase that links what has been written before with what is going to be written or said. Therefore, in writing they are mostly seen in action in the concluding sentence of a paragraph, thereby immediately introducing or linking with the information in the next paragraph. AQA states that these linking paragraphs must be seamlessly integrated. This means that it mustn't be obvious that you have deliberately used a discourse marker, and instead they must be blended in. An easy way to think of the difference between a student that uses obvious discourse markers and a student that uses discourse markers that are seamlessly integrated is to think of the difference between Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein and a normal human. As you may know, Frankenstein was supposed to be a human being created by Dr. Frankenstein. It was supposed to be the perfect human, and Frankenstein created him by joining the body parts of various different humans, basically sewing them together with a needle and thread. Now, Frankenstein did this in the 19th century when plastic surgery hadn't been invented and scar tissue was inevitable. One of the main reasons why the general public hated the creature was because he looked so ugly. If the creature had looked like a Roman statue here, what Romans thought was a representation of the perfect human form, they were more than likely to have accepted him. So just as society didn't accept Frankenstein's creature in large part because Dr. Frankenstein was awful at sewing and made a scarred-laden mess of a person, the examiner is not going to accept your work as grade 9 if your paragraphs are joined together with obvious and jarring discourse markers. So, from the last lesson you will remember that the concluding sentences, or the zoom out section of the paragraph we were working on looked like this. Now, as you should know, if you've watched the video on how to create, structure and link essay paragraphs, link in the description box below, the concluding sentences of a paragraph should introduce what is going to be discussed in the paragraph that follows it. Let's see if I have achieved that in my example. Now, at first, my zoom out sentence of paragraph 2 doesn't seem to link directly with the zoom in sentence of paragraph 3. In paragraph 2 I've spoken about how the crowd is rowdy, but then in paragraph 3 I've immediately presented the reader with the image of a boxing ring that nobody is paying any real attention to. However, I start to build a sense of unease or suspense by describing the boxing ring in quite graphic detail, detailing the blood, bits of flesh and flies around the area. Although the boxing ring is still ignored at this point and there is no mention of the behaviour of the public discussed in paragraph 2, all that changes when the pile word is used to show that the sound of the crowd chatting carelessly is stopped as the people's attention is drawn to the boxing match that is about to start. This is what the exam board would call a seamlessly integrated discourse marker. The action in the paragraph before is joined to the action in the current paragraph, and unlike Frankenstein's monsters' stitches, it's not obvious. As usual, it's easy to downgrade these discourse markers. Look at the bad example below. However, as soon as they arrive at the fair's location, all sense of discipline and thereby commonality with ants is lost, as chaotically every individual scatters around the various exhibits, whooping, shouting and barging. In the middle of the picture is a boxing ring and the crowd are shouting around it as a drunk member of the public decides he is going to fight Ivan the Terrible. Not only is this discourse marker really obvious, it breaks the continuity of the piece of work and jars the reader out of the imaginary scene that has been created up until this point. By writing in the middle of the picture, I have reminded the reader that I am describing a picture. I'm talking literally, and therefore what I have written loses its impact as a piece of creative writing. It's like how if you were watching a 19th century drama, in the middle of the shoot you saw a can of Coke or an iPhone. This would clearly demonstrate to the reader that what they are watching is not real, as obviously these things would not exist in the time period of the story being depicted. Now, of course, it would be unlikely that you would place a boxing ring and the build-up to a fight in your description in exactly the same way and at exactly the same time. However, what you write has to use discourse markers in the same seamless way to transition between one paragraph and another. Using the following ingredients or components, build your own paragraph that follows on from the closing sentence. As you write, remember, don't change the subject from what you have been discussing in the previous paragraph. The action needs to follow on. Maintain the illusion that what you are writing is actually happening and is real. No reference to the picture. You have 10 minutes. Here is my example. Above the hubbub of the fair, a deafening scream cuts through the air and all attention is drawn to a rather dirty woman with a bruised face. As she begins to shake and froth at the mouth, a pickpocket empties the contents of the pockets of the people that encircle her. Then, with a wink of an eye, the pickpocket signals to the crazy woman that her and his job are complete. The boy disappears into the crowd and the woman apologises, saying, "Sorry, sirs and ladies, I have no idea what came over me." Understandably confused, the small gathering looked on irritated before placing their hands in their pockets and realising their wallets are gone. Before they join the dots, the screaming woman blends into the crowd and disappears forever. Here hopefully you can see that I've blended the action that happens in the paragraph above, people making noise and rushing around in a disorganised way, with the actions of the woman and a pickpocket who are working together to make money committing petty crime. Again, although I am focusing on one or two individuals here, as I would using the zoom in section of the paragraph with the CCTV technique, the people I am describing would not seem out of place in this situation. They are equally chaotic, as demonstrated by the woman's dirtiness and the fact that her face is bruised. When it later becomes clear that both the pickpocket and the women are working together, in the focus section of the paragraph, it isn't jarring or shocking to the reader. These types of people would be expected to be in the crowd and doing the things they are. The zoom out section of this paragraph concludes this segment and prepares the reader for the next paragraph of description. Naturally, if I had written something like, "A woman picks some flowers, a bee stings her, and understandably she starts screaming in a deafening way that annoys people. There are no pickpockets above the trees." Not only would this not make sense, but it would also show a jarring use of discourse markers. It also demonstrates that the CCTV and PAL methods of writing aren't fail-safes. They can help you to produce decent pieces of creative writing, but you can still write some fairly nonsensical stuff if you don't think and write clearly about your ideas. In the final lesson of this series, we will look at the remaining paragraphs of the model answer and deal with a number of things, including the best ways to change the subject of what you are writing, or focus shift, without using jarring discourse markers. We will also concentrate on bringing your writing to what seems like a natural end, ensuring that you are hitting some other requirements of the mark scheme for this question. Thank you again for watching. Please do like and subscribe to the channel, and remember to check out our website checkmatetutors.co.uk for further educational lessons and resources. Goodbye for now.